Hey guys, it's Daniel, welcome back. The following is a clip from my video on Layne Staley and Man in the Box. If you want to see the full video, it's linked below. From various points between August of 91 to January of 92, Alice in Chains toured with Van Halen as an opening act. It was a big moment for the band, and in a way brought things full circle for Layne Staley, who grew up a big fan of Van Halen. Unfortunately, it's also believed that it was during this tour when Layne Staley started dabbling with heroin. Now, before I go any further, something needs to be made clear. Though Layne is believed to have started using heroin during the tour, it doesn't mean he started using heroin because of the tour. This is an important distinction to make because Layne's heroin use and the Van Halen tour may have been coincidental. Van Halen may have had nothing at all to do with heroin entering Layne's life. As a matter of fact, no source that I have looked into has ever said that Van Halen got Layne involved with heroin. So, how exactly did heroin enter Layne's life? To this day, there is no definitive answer. No one definitively knows. However, the person that is often pointed to as the person who introduced Layne to heroin is Demry Perreault, Layne Staley's longtime on-again, off-again girlfriend. Now, to be fair, there are those who have defended Demry and have said that she did not introduce Layne to heroin, but rather that it was Layne who introduced her to heroin. Though there is no 100% consensus, most people who have spoken on the topic publicly have said it was Demry who introduced Layne to the drug. Regardless of who introduced who, another big question is when. When did Layne start using heroin? According to Johnny Bacolis, a close friend of Layne's, Layne Staley told him that he started using heroin during the Van Halen tour. The following is from Alice in Chains' The Untold Story. Quote, Bacolis asked Layne how his heroin use began. He recalls Layne telling him they ran out of cocaine and Demry went out looking for more, but instead came back with heroin. This, Bacolis says, is his best recollection of when and how Layne first tried heroin, as told to him by Layne himself. Regarding Demry's use, Bacolis said, I think she was using at that point on and off. I don't know how seriously she was using, but she was using enough to take it when someone gave it to her. End quote. If this story is true, and if Layne did start using heroin during the Van Halen tour, that would mean the story Johnny Bacolis is telling about Demry getting Layne heroin must have happened at some point between August of 91 to January of 92, the period of time Alice in Chains was touring with Van Halen. Dave Jordan, the man who produced Alice in Chains' first two records, Facelift and Dirt, has said that Layne was not using heroin during the making of Facelift, which was recorded from various points between December of 89 and April of 1990. Dirt, which was recorded between April to July of 92, well after the Van Halen tour, was a different story. Dave Jordan once recalled the following to journalist David DeSola. Quote, I went to Arizona and saw them play with Van Halen. Layne was definitely acting different at that point. Layne did coke and he drank a lot, so I didn't know if he was drunk or whatever, but he wasn't the same. Layne was usually gregarious and cracking jokes all the time. I went to their tour bus before the concert, and Layne was really quiet. I didn't know what was up with him. He is the only one, besides Mike Starr later of course, to try heroin. Jerry never did heroin, neither did Sean. End quote. Interestingly, when it comes to Mike Starr, one of the people who has accused Demry Perreault of introducing Layne to heroin is John Starr, Mike's father. Like Layne, Mike also had struggles with heroin. John Starr once said the following, quote, the drugs came as a result of Layne's connection with Demry. They did no drugs until they started touring. I loved her. Her and I got along great. Mike and Layne and her had more fun than everybody else on tour together. But she introduced Layne to heroin. Layne introduced Mike to heroin. End quote. For her part, Demry's mother Kathleen once said the following, quote, people who love Demry blame Layne for her addiction. That's what people do when you love somebody and they're hanging with somebody else and they're doing bad things. You don't blame that person. You say, oh, it's their friends. Oh, he's running with a bad group of people. End quote. Regardless of who introduced who, both Demry and Layne died heroin-related deaths. Layne on April 5, 2002, and Demry on October 29, 1996.